down soon, I'm told.
Thank
and hold now. They had a pool and good afternoon. Here we are in our new arrangement of social distancing. Thank you for being here. It's a very important day for us for a number of reasons. It's heartbreaking that we have passed a milestone of 1 million people in our country who are sick, and nearly 6,000 died of the coronavirus. The American people expect Congress to do all that we can to protect lives, livelihood, the life of our democracy, and what we do here. And they expect us to ensure that the nearly $2 trillion that historically we have passed a number of bills is widely and effectively used, that it goes to those who need it the most. And so today, to put this in a historical perspective, of World War II, then Senator Harry Truman, senator, the Democratic administration, but he was the senator, and he basically said, I knew, number one, there had been 116 investigating committees, and I felt that the Car Committee, before the fact, would prevent a lot of waste and maybe even save some lives. That's the way it turned out. It was a committee that cost around $1 million, saved $50 and those dollars of those years. So it's about waste, fraud, and abuse, as I said, making sure the money goes where it's supposed to go. What I loved about what Harry Truman said is that as spending said, he said every 10 cents that was spent for these work relief projects, the WBA and the PWA, every dime was looked into and was always against spending a nickel that would help poor people and give jobs to the men who didn't have any. But the minute they started spending money, defense money, the sky was the limit, and no questions asked. Now, we want to have all the resources to bring the economy back, but we don't want this excessive attention well and see how the states do before we do more and that, as Harry Truman. It's not about today. Today, that purpose that was captured by the senator, next soon President, formed a special part of the panel that on the coronavirus. The committee again will prevent fraud and abuse, make sure that it goes where it's needed most, ensure that if we focus on making sure that the response is by the best science and guided by health experts. I'm proud to appoint and accomplished leaders to the committee who will assure that our coronavirus response puts working families free. I'm very delighted that with the House, Mr. Library, chair of the committee, ways, including as a long-term member of the Appropriate Committee. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and Congresswoman last chair of the Small Business Committee. Their committees have part of such a matter. We're talking small businesses, which are such an important part of our economy. So a member of financial services, but the combination of financial services and small business is very important. Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, chair of the committee, is on this committee, all the financial services committee. Congressman Bill Foster, science, he brings his eye shade mentality as well as the big picture of the economy of our country and as a small business. Then Jamie Raskin, attorney of law, recognized as professor of constitutional law, brings his historical perspective and entrepreneurial approach to taking the country at an action as we review the disparities that we're. And then Congressman Kim is a member of Congress, brings national security credentials in a very important way, judgment to he's part of our defense class, and he's also the small business committee, actual chair of a chair of that committee. So again, it is the excitement establish this is partisan, hoping that the Republican leader soon. We've been in communication. I've told him a couple days ago who I was going to be appointing, so he make his own judgment about the to be as partisan as possible and very much a part of doing the right thing for the American people, and nobody does better. Chair of the Select on the Coronavirus, Mr. Witt, distinguished gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Clyburn.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to thank you for the faith and confidence. I think I better do this a little different. Faith and confidence that you have demonstrated in appointing me to chair this committee, and also for your thoughtfulness, your thoroughness in appointing the members of the committee. I want to also say that these members, I know all of them, have worked very closely with all of them, and they know these issues very well, and I think they will do the country proud as we go about the business of trying to make sure that the trillions of taxpayer dollars that are intended to mitigate the effects of this crisis are dispersed in a way that is efficient, effective, and Speaker Pelosi envisions, as she just said, that this committee will operate as the 1941 Human Committee did, and hopefully we will not just model that committee, hopefully we will meet with similar success. I feel confident that we will. In this moment of crisis, the American people expect for Congress to lead. We have no higher priority than the health and well-being of the American people. And as they go about the business of struggling, maintain good health, to find ways to pay the rent, the mortgage, and hopefully take care of their families by keeping food on the table, we will do our part to make sure that they treat with dignity and respect, and as I said, fairly. Congress has a constitutional duty and a moral responsibility to ensure that the $2 trillion plus in taxpayer money spent wisely and properly to address the needs of the American people. The American people deserve it, and they expect it. I look forward to Republican leader McCarthy making his appointments to the committee so that we can go about our business of carrying out our responsibilities in a bipartisan manner. In that regard, please allow me to cite a adage that I often refer to, and that is that says the best way to predict future performance is to look at past behavior. Now, I don't know whether or not the Speaker is aware of this or not. For the 18 years of Congress, it was my and responsibility to conduct oversight and supervise investigations into state agencies. I did so for 4 governors, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And in those nearly 18 years, I was never creditably accused of carrying out my responsibilities in a politically partisan manner. And I don't plan to do so in this instance. If one were to refer to a bit of history, you will see that the most contentious event that ever occurred on the campuses of college in South Carolina, at least in my time, took place on the campus of the Citadel. And I was asked by Governor Riley to make recommendations to the state of South Carolina as to how to overcome it and how to prepare for the future. A second very contentious event took place in the little town of Conway, where we had virtually martial law in that town. I was asked to investigate that by then Governor Carroll Campbell, and we did so in a way that all people in South Carolina felt that we did it fairly, and we did not do it politically. We will not do that in this instance. So I'm looking forward to Leader McCarthy making his appointments to this committee, because it's important to the American people that we do what is necessary for them to maintain confidence in their government and do it in a way that's transparent. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Clyburn, Mr. Whip Clyburn. That is, I was aware of your reputation in that regard, but I know firsthand your work in working on after post-Katrina as chair of the task force, where it was clear you were there for the people, not for any other agenda than that. And then also later, when we had the post-2008 downturn in our economy, how you worked to help build us back in a bipartisan way, almost agnostic. Doesn't matter where the ideas are coming from. What matters is what works for the American people. So thank you for your nonpartisan, patriotic leadership. I do want to say that this committee already has a measure of success. As you know, 2 of the members of the committee, Chairwoman Maxine Waters and Chairwoman Nydia Velasquez, were very instrumental in putting in the bill the issue about lower underbanked businesses being able to access the loans. We had some concerns with the reports that were coming out after the first tranche was spent almost immediately. And so we, in the new bill, we put forth a specific carve-out for those underbanked communities. We're waiting to hear from the Secretary today the names of some of those small businesses that received loans. But when I say we've already had a victory, earlier today, the Small Business Administration put out an advisory that between 4 p.m. today and midnight tonight, Eastern daylight time, the window for loans would only be for those financial institutions below $1 billion, which just gives them so much opportunity. And that's a very big step forward. That was the spirit of the legislation, and we're glad that it's giving this opportunity, because if it's always first come, first serve, it's very hard, no matter how you construct it, to ensure that among those even underbanked, that the smallest businesses are getting the opportunity that they have. Congratulations to our two chairwomen, and I'm very excited that what we go from here in terms of legislation, which I'll talk about tomorrow, but just is that we're saluting our heroes. And our heroes were well served in our previous bill by the leadership of Frank Pallone, who was largely responsible for our important language for $100 billion for hospitals and testing, as well as the PPE and the rest for our heroes. So that takes me to the point of all of this. Of course, we're going to act in a nonpartisan way in this. We owe it to our heroes, our healthcare providers, our police and fire, our emergency services people, our transit workers, our food folks, our very important, our postal workers, our teachers. All of those people are out there on the front line meeting the needs of the American people. And we are there not to spend time away from meeting their needs, but to make sure that their needs are met. And that will be part of what we do in CARES 2, which I'll talk about tomorrow. But for today, again, we think it is, we want to be worthy of those people, those heroes. They're the ones who are leading the way. The American people are leading the way, saying we don't want to go back in before it is the right time to go back in. So let us listen to the people. Let us heed the leadership of our heroes as we go forward. And as we do so, to have oversight to ensure that there is nobody ripping us off by saying they're selling masks when they don't even have any, or that they're trying to get the checks of people who are getting the advance payments, depriving them of that. There are plenty of things that we want to look into, and I have very confidence that this distinguished committee, with the balance that it has, the humanity of it all, but the experience and wisdom of these members will guide us very well. With that, we're pleased to take any questions you may have. Yes, ma'am.
Speaker Pelosi, Leader McConnell suggested yesterday afternoon that he may want to marry liability protections in a CARES 2 Act, or when you all do more funding moving forward, that may be tied to state and local funding. What's your response to that?
Well, Leader Schumer and I both on it with many of your colleagues who were present on the phone, and maybe they're present here, but they can't ask a question as they could on the phone. It said that at the time of this coronavirus challenge, especially now, we have every reason to protect our workers and our patients and all of this. So we would not be inclined to be supporting any immunity from liability. Yes, sir. Mr. Clyburn, did you want to speak to that?
No, ma'am.
No, okay.
If,
Chime in anytime.
If after-action review is going to be at all in the purview of this committee specifically.
I'm sorry. No, after action review is after action. We're still in the action. This is about the here and now and as we go forward. Now, again, our focus is on our heroes. We want to make sure that they have what they need to do their jobs. They're risking their lives to save lives. In the meantime, they may lose their jobs. So we want to make sure that how this is all implemented is in furtherance of being worthy of them. We praise them, we pray for them, we say all those things, but we're unworthy to do it unless we're there to protect them and support them. So after action review is after action. We're in the battle right now, and I would hope that when I say the battle with the coronavirus, that this will, shall we say, anticipate or perhaps stave off any waste, fraud, and abuse, because they'll know that this is about transparency and accountability. Yes, ma'am.
Just getting back to state and local aid, one of the
issues that some members had about the state and local aid was the population caps, the 500,000. Going forward in CARES 2, do you see yourselves removing that cap and having aid distributed across populations?
Well, nobody's been a bigger champion of that in the Congress than Mr. Clyburn over the years, long before any of this. Do you want to speak to that, Mr. Clyburn?
Well, I think it's very, very important for us when we talk about state and local, remember it is state and local. And the fact that we've had so often is that we get hung up at the state level and forget that the cities, the counties, even local public service districts are local governments. And we ought to pay close attention to whether or not they are getting what they need in order to carry out their responsibilities as well. And so state and local, I have been pressing my caucus for years to remember it didn't say all local, it is and local. And I'm going to be very, very conscious of that as we have these discussions.
So if I may, what the, again, more for tomorrow, but since you asked, we are having, what our plan is now is to have two separate, maybe even three, state, county, and municipality. And we can take it all the way down, we're thinking, to 10,000 and fewer. This is a big issue for all of the members because the governors have a big problem. They have a big problem in terms of the coronavirus, many of the states that do. And so they want to meet their budget needs, and the communities do as well. So we expect the governors to spend money in their states down to every level, but we also want some money to initiate there. Now, let me just say it's for two purposes. One is, and I want to make this very clear because you mentioned the Republican leader. He said, well, we're not doing state and local because we want to see how the old money works first. Oh, really? But no review of any other money, mind. But anyway, he said, we're not taking care of their budget woes. That's not what this is about. Everything we're doing is about the coronavirus. So when states are submitting what their needs are and what their outlays are, it's about what they did in terms of what they spent on the coronavirus and what their revenue loss is. This is essential to their survival, that their revenue loss is counted as a coronavirus cost as well. And that applies to state, county, municipality, and hospitals as well. So this is a very important principle that we will have there. It has nothing to do, whatever their past history is. The one state he mentioned, Illinois, had its woes under a Republican governor, but he fails to mention that. But we're not interested. Well, that's not our issue. Our issue is what have you spent on corona and what is the opportunity revenue lost in coronavirus. But yes, we expect to have some direct assistance. And this, again, with every call that we have with our members, this is an overwhelming issue for them. Any other? Just back to you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Question. Last week, you all had discussions between, I know Leader Boyer and Leader McCarthy were talking about what potential proxy and remote voting was looking like that had been taken off the floor. Are those bipartisan conversations still
Yes.
ongoing, and what do they look like?
Yes, well, again, our purpose here is to talk about oversight and the excellence of the committee of the Democrats on the committee that I have named, and the totality of their experience, wisdom, humanity that they bring to that. In order for us to meet and also to vote on legislation that the gentlelady was referencing, we have to have a process. So we had, just to put in context, more than a month ago, I asked the chairman of the Rules Committee, which is one of the committees of jurisdiction, to give us a report on remote voting, every aspect of it. He did so maybe a month ago, and then he asked for comment from members, and then he put out a recommendation a little more than 2 weeks ago that what was feasible was remote voting by proxy, that we would continue to look at the technologies to see how much more we could do for the whole body, but that there were some possibilities for virtual meetings, smaller number rather than 430. That they began their meeting when we were here to perhaps vote on the proxy. I had the impression, rightfully so, I think, from the distinguished Republican leader, Mr. McCarthy, that he wasn't there, but it might be if reviewing what could happen because they, as we all do, want to come in to do the people's work present, although we're doing the people's work every minute of every day in our districts, but nonetheless present in the Capitol so that he would look at it. He told the Los Angeles Times, I made a commitment to her that I wasn't there yet, but I could be, but we do want to have sessions in Washington. So with the opportunity that this could be bipartisan, because that would be better, in my view, if you're changing how Congress votes after 200 some years, that if you can do it in a bipartisan way, that would be better. And with that hope, they have Mr. Hoyer and Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McGovern, and Mr. Cole, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren and her ranking member are Davis have been a meeting. They've had a couple of meetings so far, but more conversations. And I think that the consensus is that there will be a vote on proxy voting. Whether Republicans join or not is going to be up to them to announce. But on the committee meetings, there's some serious considerations. Some members want to come back next week. I think Appropriations has announced that they're going to have a meeting, and maybe small business. Chairman may decide to have a meeting next week here. There could be meetings of everyone here, depending on the size of the committee, or virtual or hybrid. Leadership of the committee and then other people in by way of other technologies. I do want to say, though, throughout all of this, we've had 30 briefings because we can't officially have a hearing because we haven't voted that we can do hearings by remote yet. But we've had 20 meetings, at least 20 of each of the committees of jurisdiction, and also that the Appropriations Committee said they're going to be meeting next week. And that it brings me to my final point, which is Mr. Clyburn's committee is a place that will have all of this. 20 briefings, okay. And the Select Committee will build upon this work. But as do not have any impression that this is in any way a substitute for what the committees do. They all have an oversight responsibility. 20 briefings already. There'll be more once we officially say it can be a hearing or a committee meeting. And so all of them have a responsibility, whether it's Mr. Pallone on the health issues, Congresswoman Eshoo has her subcommittee on health and has something in the works, whether it's Bobby Scott for OSHA, family medical leave, pensions, all of those issues, how they are affected by this, whether it's Mr. Agriculture Committee, Colin Peterson, and how we're meeting the food needs of the American people. We want SNAP, we want food stamps and other nutrition programs in the legislation. That's been a struggle. Again, on Ways and Means, issues that relate to Medicare and in some cases Medicaid, but that's also an Energy and Commerce issue. The Banking Committee will have its oversight hearings. The Small Business Committee will have its. So it isn't as if this is, and the list goes on. So it isn't as if this takes the place of that. They will all be happening. But they have other business to deal with too. The sole purpose of this Select Committee is to make sure that we have a bright light shining on the implementation on $2 trillion of taxpayer dollars to make sure they're spent in a way that removes all doubt there won't be waste, fraud, abuse, etc., but that instead they will go to meet the needs of the American people in a way that is fair and equitable, that addresses disparities that we have had, but also recognizes our responsibility to do so in as nonpartisan a way as possible. Did you have a final?
If I could follow up on what you just said, that this committee does not replace the role of all of the other committees, but even the vote to have this committee did follow along party lines. Republicans are concerned that that's exactly their reasoning. They're saying, why do we even need this committee if we have other oversight committees, how do you reassure them?
Well, let me
that
just
what you
say,
said is gonna be-
gentlemen, that you use the word their reasoning, those two words. Their reasoning when they established the Committee on Planned Parenthood to do away with Planned Parenthood, there were committees that dealt with women's health issues and the rest, but they decided to form a select committee on Planned Parenthood. Again, 50 million people, 100 million people had not been diagnosed. 50,000, 60,000 people had not died, but they thought it was urgent, despite all of the oversight of the other committees, to have a select committee. Benghazi, how long and how much money did they spend on Benghazi when they had the Armed Services Committee, the Intelligence Committee, and all of those committees looking at all of that? And yet, select committees. So their so-called reasoning doesn't seem to apply by their own experience. I myself have a select committee on climate. It doesn't mean that the other committees of jurisdiction, every committee I tasked, do what you can do about climate, whether it's the Defense Committee or the Energy and Commerce Committee or the Natural Resources Committee or the appropriate, whatever, Ways and Means, whatever your committee is. How can you help us address the climate crisis? That was 2007 when I did it before, and now too. It is not to say we don't want the wisdom and the intellectual resources that can be gathered there. It's just that a select committee does just that. That is the focus. That is where the public will pay attention to what is going on and have the assurance that their taxpayer dollar is being spent wisely and well. They were arguing against themselves when they made that case. But, you're asking the question, so they may have convinced somebody. But nonetheless, I know they didn't convince you, I guess. In any event, this is, again, I end where I began. We can only pray for those families who have lost their loved ones. We don't know what comfort we can be to them except to say that people really are sad for them or praying for them. The many people who are diagnosed, hopefully we can get the resources to them that they need, whether it's a ventilator or a first responder or a public health person. And we'll be talking about that more tomorrow, but in the speaker's weekly press conference. But for today, it's about our responsibility to do justice to those first responders. Many of them, healthcare workers, all of our heroes, risk their lives to save other people's lives, and now many of them will lose their jobs because of the lack of resources, and in addition to which, the lack of PPE for them to do their jobs well. So in sadness for those who've lost their lives, and hope for those who are diagnosed, with respect for our heroes, let us be worthy of them by doing this in the most nonpartisan way as possible. And we couldn't be better served in that regard than a person who takes all of this very seriously and patriotically, our distinguished chairman, our distinguished whip, Mr. Clyburn. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.